Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. This is Dr. Muhammad Shafiq, lecturer of Department of Islamic and Pakistan Studies, and your instructor of Introduction to Logic. The course code of this course is PHI 101, as you can see on the screen. And this is lecture number 16. Today we are going to discuss what do we mean by fallacies of ambiguity. What are the fallacies of ambiguity? So let's move to the topic. Again, I would like to throw some light on fallacy before moving on to what are the fallacies of ambiguity. So what do we mean by the fallacy itself? As you know, I have mentioned in previous couple of lectures that fallacy is the argument in which there is a mistake which cannot be seen apparently, but that is a kind of technical mistake which we need to know, because the whole purpose of logic is to know the methods and principles which distinguish between correct and incorrect reasoning. And as this is important to know the rules of correct reasoning, it is also very much important to know what is incorrect reasoning, or how in the arguments people might be deceived by different arguers. So that is quite important to know what is the fallacy. So I hope by now you might have learned what the fallacy is, actually what fallacy means. Now we are going to move to the topic, which is what are the fallacies of ambiguity. As you know, as we discussed in a previous lecture, that the fallacies have been classified, or they have, the fallacies have classification, 4 classifications given by different philosophers, although they have some differences upon this classification, but still, generally speaking, there are 4 major groups of fallacies. Today we are going to discuss fallacies of ambiguity. We have already discussed fallacies of relevance, and now these are quite important because fallacies of ambiguity are also very frequently used in our society, in our daily life. So we need to be aware of such fallacies. So fallacies of ambiguity are the kinds of fallacies we commit due to the confusion of meanings of the words within an argument. A term may have one meaning or one sense in the premise, but it might be used in another sense or meaning in the conclusion. When an inference is drawn in this kind of argument, it is fallacious, and we call it fallacy, a fallacy of ambiguity. Now, there are 5 fallacies, or 5 types of fallacies of ambiguity, which we are going to discuss one by one. So, number 1 is called the fallacy of equivocation. When in an argument such terms are used which have more than one meaning, or used in a way to convey one meaning in premise and another meaning in conclusion, the words or phrases may have different meanings in different contexts. So if we use these terms or phrases awkwardly or loosely, we are basically committing fallacy of equivocation. The fallacy of equivocation arises from the ambiguous use of term in an argument. It is a fallacy in which 2 or more meanings of a word or phrase are used in different parts of the argument, that is to say, in premise and conclusion, differently. For example, there's a there's a word, there's a term in English language called right. So if I say right, this right has more than one meaning. One meaning of right is to be on the right side. The other meaning of right is to be correct. The third verbal meaning of the word right would be like writing something. So if I mean in written argument, obviously the spelling of writing something and being right is different. But in verbal argument, obviously you cannot differentiate. And even in written argument, the word right has two different meanings. So if I use the word right in the sense of being on the right side in premise, and then I use the term right in conclusion, being right as correct, I would be committing fallacy of equivocation because I am using the same term uh, in different senses, in different meanings. So fallacy of equivocation basically is when you use, whether intentionally or unintentionally or unknowingly, you use a term or a phrase in one sense in one part of the argument, that is to say in premise, and then you use it in different sense or different meaning in the conclusion. So because it is one of the fallacies of ambiguity, it is the ambiguous use of the terms. That is why it falls under the group of class of fallacies of ambiguity, and it is called the equivocation because it uses a single term in more than one sense or meaning. Now we'll move on to the fallacy of amphiboly. When an argument is presented in such a way that formulation of the statement is loose or ambiguous use of punctuations changes the meaning of the statement. A statement is amphibolous when its meaning are not clear due to the awkward use of punctuations or construction. For example, if we say, you might have heard one of the books uh, written by the President of Pakistan, ex-dictator General Ayub Khan, and the title of that book was Friends Not Masters. So now when in written communication or an argument, we need to be very careful while using punctuation marks. So if we write this phrase, friends not masters, on the board, and if you put comma after friends, it would mean that he is basically referring towards Americans as friends, not masters. So if you put comma after friends, that would mean Americans are friends, not masters. But in the same phrase, if we change the punctuation mark and putting comma after not rather than friend, saying that friends not and then masters, that would entirely change the meaning of the phrase. That would mean that they are not friends but masters. So these kind of punctuation can change the meaning of the whole statement. So fallacy of amphiboly is a kind of fallacy in which loose or awkward combination of words is used, which can be interpreted in more than one way. The argument contains a premise based on one interpretation and conclusion is based on the other interpretation. A statement is amphibolous when its meaning is indeterminate because of the loose use of words combination. When we use ambiguous grammatical structure in a sentence, The amphiboly lies in the sentence, not in the word, because of the construction of the sentence or the statement. For example, the statement, a piano for sale by a lady in an oak case with curved legs. Now, a piano for sale by a lady, if you put comma after this statement, in an oak case with a curved legs, that would mean that the oak case has got the curved legs. But if you say a piano for sale by a lady in an oak case and put comma after that with curved legs, that would mean that the lady has curved legs. So it's the same statement, but just using this punctuation mark or the combination of words loosely would entirely change the meaning, the whole meaning of the statement or argument. That is why it is called fallacy of ambiguity, and it is called the fallacy of amphiboly. Now we'll move on to the third one, accent, the accent. I hope you know the meaning of accent. Accent basically means, like when we say it in Urdu, lahja, like the way we speak, the takallum. So accent, when an argument is presented in such a way that with the use of different accent, the whole meaning of the statement is changed. It normally happens in verbal arguments as it relies upon the accent. How? Okay. For example, when I say this book belongs to me, that carries the meaning that I'm referring to this book, this particular book, saying that it is mine. But when I say this book belongs to me, that means that this book is mine alone. It is not someone else's. While in the first sentence, when I say this book belongs to me, that stressing upon the book entails the meaning that there are so many books, but I am referring to this particular book. I'm claiming that this particular book is mine. I hope it makes sense. So accent is a fallacy in which phrase is used to convey two different meanings within an argument, and difference is based on the changes in the emphasis given to the words within the phrase. For example, when I say, I never sold you this car. Now this statement, if I say, I never sold you this car, that entails the meaning that someone else might have sold this car to you, but not me. Right? The same statement when I say, I never sold this car to you, that means, that gives the meaning that although I have given this car to you, but I have never sold it to you. So it changes the meaning again. Same statement, the third different meaning would say, I never sold you this car. If I stress upon this car, that would mean, that entails the meaning that I might have sold you another car, but not this particular car. So the fallacy of accent is normally using or stressing or emphasizing certain phrases or words in a statement that would entirely change the meaning of the statement. And again, because it is the words, the combination of the words are ambiguously used, that is why it is called fallacy of ambiguity. And also because it depends upon the accent, that is why this fallacy has been named as the fallacy of the accent. Now, fallacy of ambiguity is called the fallacy of composition. When an argument is based upon using the attributes of parts for the whole of the parts, in other words, such fallacy is committed when it goes from distributive to collective use of a term. How? Okay. It is a fallacy in which an inference is mistakenly drawn from the attributes of the parts of a whole to the attributes of whole. In other words, this fallacy consists in going from distributive to collective use of a term. For example, when I say 3 and 2 are odd and even, figure 3 and 2 are odd and even, that is the first premise. When I say 5 is 3 and 2, then we conclude, therefore 5 is odd and even. Or if I say Mr. X is good, then I say Mr. X is a sportsman. And we conclude from these two premises saying that therefore Mr. X is a good sportsman. Now being good is something else and being a sportsman is something else. So when we try to attribute these two distributive terms to a collective one, being a good sportsman, we are basically committing this fallacy of composition. So this is the fourth fallacy of ambiguity, which is the product of using the attributes of distributive to collective use of a term. Moving on to number 5, division. Now, if you have understood the fallacy of composition, it is very easy to understand fallacy of division. It is the converse of that of fallacy of composition. This fallacy is converse to the fallacy of composition. Here, when a collective term is used for the parts of whole, then a conclusion is drawn from the attributes of whole for the attributes of its parts. How? For example, when I say 6 is an even number, premise 1, then premise 2, I say 5 and 1 are 6. And then I draw a conclusion on the basis of these two premises saying that therefore 5 and 1 are even, which seems logically following from the premises, but in fact it is not so. So we are committing fallacy of division. I'll give you another example. Like when I say Ali is a good sportsman, right? This is the premise 1. Then in premise 2 I say Ali is a sportsman. And then on the basis of these two premises I draw the conclusion saying that therefore Ali is good. This is basically a fallacy of division because we are using the attributes of whole for the attributes of parts. It is a fallacy in which mistaken inference is drawn from the attributes of whole to the attributes of the parts of the whole. This is actually converse of the fallacy of composition. It is committed when we pass from a statement about a group or as a collective whole to the same statement without which individual or member of that group. So these are the 5 fallacies of ambiguity because they are called fallacies of ambiguity because they are the product of ambiguous use of terminology. That is why it's called fallacies of ambiguity, and the fifth one, the last one, is called fallacy of division, because we try to use the attributes of whole for the attributes of its parts. Hence, it is called fallacy of division. I fallacies of ambiguity as well. And if there are any questions by any chance, or any comments, or if you did not understand anything, please do let us know, so that we can clarify, we can discuss it before using the next topic in our coming lecture. Uh, and please try to give a read to the books recommended and the handouts I've given in the class. Till then, take care, and Allah Hafiz, and see you in the next lecture. Thank you very much.